Welcome to Techtastic, where we navigate the intersection of technology and business, uncovering innovations that redefine our world.
Ari Brojde from Estateably, welcome to It's Techtastic. It is so lovely to have you here.
It's great to be here, Christian. Thank you for having me.
So actually, I was going to talk to you before we got into the show about something. I have a lot of guests on the show that are Canadians and run Canadian businesses. And there's a couple of things I really like about that. First of all, longtime hockey player, played 20 seasons as an adult in beer leagues and city leagues with a firefighting team. So first of all, do you play hockey?
I don't, but most of my friends do, and my kids play hockey.
So as long as your kids play hockey, we're good.
Yeah.
This Estateably thing actually made me think of it. So my wife's grandfather was a professional hockey player back before they wore helmets. And I was a pallbearer at his funeral. I got to play hockey with him a couple times in his last few years of life. And going through the process of, well, first of all, if they didn't do estate planning, which he did not do any planning for his estate. So when he died, we all had to deal with all the mess that comes with that. And when I first read about what you guys are doing, I was like, oh, where was that 20 years ago when we were dealing with this? But it's a very rough time for the family to deal with the situation of the death that already led to it. It's difficult because it's also often first time people are dealing with lawyers in the case of what we were going through, but there's just a lot of strain and stress. So I'm curious, how did the idea come about first of all, and then tell me about what you guys actually do.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So my background is in financial services. I worked for the better half of my professional career for two of Canada's largest financial institutions as a private wealth advisor. And during that time, I had heard a tremendous amount about this impending wealth transfer, that over the course of the next 20 years, we were going to see something to the tune of $30 trillion of assets change hands from one generation. And I'm probably aging myself a little bit, but that was when I was in the business. And today, depending on who you ask, that number is closer to $100 trillion of assets that are going to pass hands. And unfortunately, I got to experience this intergenerational wealth transfer firsthand when my grandmother passed away in 2015. And my business partner, who happens to be my first cousin, he was studying factors engineering at Tufts University in Boston. And I reached out to him about 2 years after my grandmother had passed away. And I said, Alex, I can tell you from my experience with financial services that complex estates can take a very long time to settle because of the sheer complexity of them. But here was a case where grandmother left a very simple estate. It was as plain vanilla as you could get. And yet 2 years in, we still haven't received our inheritance. And she, unlike your grandfather, did some estate planning. She had a will. Her will named her 3 grandchildren as the sole and equal beneficiaries of the estate. Here we were, 3 grandchildren that all still get along to this day. And so 2 years into the administration, we hadn't received our inheritance. And we both got very intellectually curious around what it was about this process that took such a long time. And we looked, and to use the horribly Canadian analogy of the hockey player, we looked at the tools that were made available to professionals in this space. And we saw that there were a lot of companies that were building really great things on the planning side. But knowing that this great wealth transfer was going to occur, we kind of wanted to go where the puck was going to be, and saw that there was very little activity in terms of companies that were focused on providing solutions that would allow professionals and, by extension, the families that they were serving with ways to automate a lot of the manual and labor-intensive processes that unfortunately come with estate administration. So we spent a good, I would say, 6 to 9 months talking to professionals in this space. And, typically you have people at trust companies that are doing this type of work. You have law firms that are doing this work, accounting firms, sometimes CPAs that do this work. And we spent a lot of time understanding their problems and pain points, and the solution that we've built over time is really a product of the learnings that we figured out in speaking with them, and creating a solution that will allow the automation of a lot of the generation of court forms and letters and closing of accounts that need to occur during the administration. But also, given that there's this massive wealth transfer that we're going through right now, there tends to be a lot of, unfortunately, litigation around estates. And so one of the ways that we help reduce the amount of litigation is to create a really robust fiduciary accounting system that will allow for beneficiaries to understand how the estate or the trust has been managed throughout time, so that they can have a clear picture of that, and hopefully that ends up reducing a lot of the infighting that a family may have around distributions of estate assets.
Yeah, I had to assume, because I didn't get into the weeds with it, we had other people doing that for us, right? But the incentives of all the parties involved, the professionals that are involved in it, is not to resolve the situation, right? If I'm a lawyer, I'm getting paid by the hour to work on something. If I'm the trust management service, the instant the money leaves my accounts, I'm not managing it, I'm not getting my fees on it. And so there seemed to be like embedded delay on purpose.
Yeah, we saw that a lot. And one of the, for the technologists in your audience, one of the things that we quickly understood around estate administration was that in order for it to be done efficiently, there had to be this business network that was formed around this project, essentially. And so we thought that blockchain was a tremendous use case, and a layer of trust amongst a group of individuals that really don't know one another, but yet need to come together to help, move this project forward, if you will.
So are you still using a blockchain solution in this, or is it?
We don't. We actually don't. One of the reasons why we didn't was that we learned quite early on that while there was this massive digital transformation that got really spurred in this industry by COVID, there were different organizations that were at different levels of their digital transformation. And because of the lag in between different organizations, some were ready to adopt the blockchain-based system and others weren't. And you really needed all the participants to agree to have this work. And so we said, look, there are things that we can do. There's tools that we can provide professionals that don't require the blockchain, that will still allow them to do things quicker. And to your point of these almost intentional delays that are being caused, one of the things that we learned was, from the point of view of the law firms, they actually can't charge a lot for doing data entry and doing form generation for court forms. They would actually prefer to have that automated so that they can then spend time doing more estate planning work, where they can potentially, or even post-mortem planning work, where you can save a family a tremendous amount of money and charge a higher rate for those services, as opposed to just simply filling in forms like a clerical work would do.
Wow. Okay. It's a brilliant place to be, and it's a very important, painful process that we're going through. And your point about the size of the wealth transfers, we've got the baby boom generation is, aging out and therefore passing on, and their assets are moving down to their children and grandchildren. Timing's amazing on it. There's obviously lessons learned along the way. There's things that you wish you hadn't done that you did, or vice versa, wish things you'd done earlier. Like, what's the one, if you could have one wish to go back in time and fix something, what would it have been?
I think I mentioned how we were a blockchain company out of the gate, and I think we didn't pivot quick enough to the realization that different organizations were at kind of different levels of their own digital transformation. So we spent a lot of time working with the Canadian Revenue Agency because they were excited. They had a project where they wanted to start implementing blockchain solutions, and when we would go and talk to financial institutions about what they revealed was their major pain point was getting something called a tax clearance certificate, which is in Canada akin to a U.S. closing letter. And this is basically a document provided by the tax authorities to say, hey, you're free to distribute the estate assets and relieve yourself as the executor of any future tax liabilities. And this process in Canada was extremely painful for the trust companies. They would say, look, we're all ready to distribute the assets, and we would have to wait sometimes 8 months, sometimes a year and a half to get this piece of paper from the IRS. And they would get complaints from their customers and saying, why are you deliberately holding our assets? And one of the things that we spoke to the financial institutions about was our working with the CRA. And so we led with that. It got them very interested. And then when we realized that it was going to take longer than we hoped with the Canadian Revenue Agency, and so we could still provide financial institutions with a very robust solution, they kept on saying, "Well, what about the spray? What about what's happening with the deal there?" And so we kind of pigeonholed ourselves for our first year until we could finally create enough of a value in our solution that it became less of an issue. But if I could change one thing, that would be that.
So it's a story that comes up over and over and over again, that the pivot and the technology piece often being the core reason why, like, the industry is not ready. We're in a complex space. That's a very common problem that comes up. But the part of it that I find very, very fascinating with what you're doing is, as a startup founder, a repeat one myself, but also as an angel investor, like, the things I want to know about a company are, first, you've found something profoundly broken and painful that people are willing to pay to fix, which you clearly have. The second is that it is fixable. It's not something that's just a boondoggle experience that we're going to go after forever. So what's the profound insight you had, or the technology unlock that you found that made it possible for you to solve this? And I have to assume that it's partially that digital transformation had begun, and the scale of the problem for all the parties involved has put a lot of, I guess, just impetus for the industry to find a solution.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. I mean, when you're selling to people in these industries, which are typically resistant to change, they're very, lawyers, accountants, financial managers are very conservative by nature, and so to get them to even switch from a system that they've used and they know for 20 years to a new system is often a challenge. But I think that there was such a discrepancy in their customer experiences between all kinds of technology that they get to access in their daily lives over the past 10 to 15 years, that the experience that they would get, with these lawyers, these accountants, and with these trust companies using their old systems that weren't cloud-based, that didn't allow collaboration to happen easily, that kept kind of information asymmetries alive and well, getting them to adopt a new this digital transformation that was occurring that would essentially force their hand into saying, hey, if we want to be able to keep our customers, we are going to need to adopt new technologies that allow for those things. And I think that we were fortunate with COVID that you had an office industry that really overnight had to go remote. And if you were stuck on-premise based solutions, you just couldn't service your customers. So especially up here in Canada, where the major players were on-premise based solutions, they couldn't even, and there was a lot of changes happening, if you recall, just with different laws being passed. So couldn't get the new versions of the software installed on the desktops of their customers. And so they turned to a cloud-based solution like ours.
Well, it's another case where that isolation that came because of the COVID pandemic created another opportunity. This is interesting to me too. There's a lot of industries that were stuck in a paper world for whatever reason: resistance to change, complexity of the world that they existed in. Logistics was one of those that, to this day, when an ocean container gets shipped, there's a pouch of paper that gets couriered around the world with it. And it's called the pouch. It's got all these paper forms in it. But during COVID, companies had to find workarounds because there was no courier, there was no flight. Like, you needed to get that container through customs. It needed to continue on because there was medical supplies in it, or food in it, or whatever. And so that opened the door for digital transformation of that industry too. And it's unfortunate that it often takes these like society breaking moments to force that kind of change in. But on the other side of it, we often come up with huge benefit from it.
Absolutely.
So we're actually getting short on time, and I always like to give the guests some time to share with the audience something that they really care about. So what would you like to share with the audience?
Yeah. Oh, just we built this amazing company based off exactly what you said was a need that we saw, that not only that my cousin and I faced, but that we knew other individuals and a lot of other individuals were facing. And so it's been exciting to listen to our customers' feedback, and that's really the driving force behind Estateably's success is really listening to customer feedback, understanding how we can make their work lives easier, more effortless. And so that's been the kind of the North Star for Estateably. I remember our early conversations with professionals, and one of the things that they used to say was, this whole process takes so much effort for so little gain. And if I could have a tool that would make me work less hard at it, and make me work smarter and more efficiently, it would be great. And I think that we're very fortunate to have great customers that have bought into our vision of using technology to make their work lives easier. And so it's been a lot of fun. And I think that's what I would leave your audience with.
I like the fact that you think it's fun. A lot of founders, especially if they found some success with what they're doing, it is fun. I enjoy what I do, no matter the level of stress that comes with it. And I left the entrepreneurial world for a while, went into big companies because companies were throwing a lot of money at me to come in and help them do what I do well, which is disrupt, right? I come in and I look at different ways of doing it, but the money doesn't make it enjoyable. The money just made it survivable. And getting back to the point where I enjoy what I do because it's a hard problem that I can solve with a smart group of people using technology is so much fun. It's such a joy to do. So
Totally agree.
Yeah, this is another part to it that I find hilarious, is that you'll see on Instagram or something like that, people playing Frisbee out on the grass lawn. They're like, oh, the entrepreneur life. I'm like, I've never seen that version of it, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason I'm surrounded by machines all the time. There's a lot to be done, and there's not enough people to do it. If it wasn't a problem worth solving, I wouldn't be here. So you found an incredibly hard problem, a really important one that impacts families' lives. It impacts people at the grieving moment too, in such a horrible way. Have to take on that level of stress and burden. It's hard to make decisions when you're grieving, and it's just a horrible time. So I thank you so much for building it and building a solution to it, because it is, having been through it, definitely going to have to go through it again. It's wonderful to know that there's somebody out there trying to solve it.
Thank you for that.
Ari, that was great.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Techtastic. I want to thank you personally for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious. Thank you for listening. If you are new here and enjoyed the content, please subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you are a regular listener, thanks so much for your continued support.
Overwhelmed by tech debt? Discover Vala AI, the solution to tech challenges with the simplicity of a click. No engineering background? No problem. Vala AI enables anyone to effortlessly tackle tech issues, freeing up your time from tech headaches. Make tech debt vanish with Vala AI, where your tech solutions are just a click away.